That's right. So one argument is, well, the ear rocks are not connected to the cochlea, right? They're in a different part of my ear. So this should affect balance, but it shouldn't affect hearing. Fluid, though, is in both vestibule, which means balance, and cochlea. So that makes some sense. It would affect hearing as well as balance. What's another thing that sort of struck you that probably wasn't BPV?
Tinnitus.
Was it?
Tinnitus.
Tinnitus, again, a hearing problem. Ringing the ear. What else made it sound like it wasn't BPV?
Because of the onset, it's whenever a change in position occurs, and she said that her symptoms are coming without warning.
Very good. So this applies that the rocks are, when you change position, this sort of implies that just whenever willy-nilly it didn't do anything. So it sort of implies that it wasn't just when she changed her position, it just happened at random for long periods of time, which again implies that it wasn't just the rocks. Yeah.
The one thing that was, it could go either way, was they often cause her to vomit, but like you said, it was it comes without, or strikes without warning, and then it causes her to vomit.
Very good.
Versus vertigo, which is you're in an elevator and you start vomiting.
That's right. So you've made the right choice. Most, I would argue, she has the one that's affecting the hearing and the balance together, the fluid buildup. Make sense? So, but let me point out one thing before we zip along. Did anyone catch this where it says the otoliths, the slide and float around in the, I thought the rocks were not in the canals. Aren't they different? Is that a typo? Say no.
No.
Not a typo. Yeah, let me show you a picture. If you go back to this picture which I showed you and look at the purple, what did the purple represent? The fluid, right? The tubing of fluid. What do you notice about the purple? They're all connected. So the fluid that you'll learn in lab tonight is continuous throughout all these structures. It's the same fluid everywhere. So if something breaks off in one, like here, it could end up in one of the other pieces. And that's also why in the Meniere's they said it affects the cochlea and the vestibules, the same fluid throughout the ear. Normally they're kept separate, but you can have things move from one part to the other because the fluid is continuous. Yes?
And would the otoliths not be able to flow into the other side because of the overlap of those structures?
Partly, and then there's actually, this is quite small here, there's a drain there anyway, so normally they shouldn't fit.
Okay.
Makes sense? So there is, it's one bunch of fluid, but they're separate canals and separate paths. Yeah.
Are the otoliths all throughout the canals?
No.
Or just at the ends?
Normally they would just, if they broke off, they pretty much end up in the ampulla,
There, you said there, okay.
which is where the problem is. That's where you detect it.
When you wrote down future colons and sacral,
Yes.
Why did you connect that to otoliths?
That's where they are. Normally they'd be living in here, which is the vestibule. So these would be where the rocks are, and this is where the fluid is. So these are rocks, these are just fluid. So that's the formal name for the vestibule.
And then there's hairs under the rocks.
And there's hairs in all the blue.
Okay.
Yes. So the hairs would be in here,
Mm.
and here, and here.
So what are the rocks made of?
Calcium carbonate. So basically, chalk. Yeah. You have chalk rocks in your ear. You'll never look at the same way.
So if one did get dislodged, would it just dissolve? Would it?
Unfortunately, they don't seem to dissolve really well. So it float around every time it bang the hair, your brain would think gravity moved.
So how would it get removed? I mean,
You don't.
You don't.
No, so there's this, well, they used to do all sorts of weird things, which we'll do in the case study, but the new one now is they put you in this contraption like from NASA. They try to fling you and force the rocks to end up back where they belong. Not yeah. So the logic is if I can change gravity, like a good physics student, I can make the rocks end up anywhere I want. So you basically just shove it back in the jello where it belongs. I'm not making this up.
So you wouldn't have them surgically removed?
You could. But in this case, they're going to do something a little different. So let's go through number 3. Notice the doctor. The doctor says, reduce salt and take diuretics. Okay, help me out, medical people. Reducing salt and peeing a lot does what? Reduces fluid. So, what's the doctor think she have? The Meniere's again, because I'm reducing the fluid in my body. Rocks shouldn't matter about fluid because they don't need fluid. So I'm trying to get the fluid out of these tubes. by making you pee a lot, because fluid is continuous, right? So remind me from Biology 112 why reducing salt reduces fluid. Say osmosis. Good, yeah, hey. Osmosis, right? Salt sucks. So less salt, less suck. Now, here comes your question. Number 5. Assuming this didn't work, they're going to do the old surgery, just cut stuff. They're going to cut one branch of one cranial nerve. So I want you to figure out what cranial nerve and what branch, why it would reduce the symptoms, and what happens if you do the other branch of the same nerve. I'm going to give you about a minute to figure that out. Good review for your exam. Hint, hint. Branch would be like with a hyphen between them.
Oh.
Hint, hint. Nod, wink, wink on the board.
Yeah, because it's just joined together.
So it wouldn't send as much.
Yeah.
But then you wouldn't
Because that's the
really
branch that affects your balance.
but then you wouldn't really have a balance.
This may help you get the right answer here.
That would be kind of dangerous. Who knows?
That's okay, consider.
So did anyone figure out which cranial nerve we want to cut in this experiment? Vestibulocochlear nerve. Vestibulo-cochlear. Now, the hyphen is optional, right? Put it in there. What number was that for your exam?
8.
Number 8. Is that sensory, motor, or mixed?
Sensory.
I heard a lot of...
Sensory.
Yeah, sensory, right? It feels my ear, right? So sensory. So the reason there's a hyphen is to remind you there's two parts. There's the vestibular branch, which does my balance. Vestibular nerve was the old word, but this vestibular branch, vestibulo. And the cochlear branch, or half, does my hearing. And so there's two branches to the one nerve, hence the hyphen. To prove I'm not making this up,
So you cut which one?
here's a picture. You look at my vestibulocochlear nerve right here. You notice that there's one that comes off the snail, and there's like another half that comes off the uticosacula here. Sebaceous canals are there. So you have a vestibular branch, cochlear branch, making one nerve. So number 8's both, but there's two halves to number 8. Northbound, southbound kind of concept. Right? They're both I-5.
So which one would you cut then?
So which one would we cut? Let's figure that out. If you want to eliminate this problem that she's getting too much fluid in here, which one would you cut, future doctors?
Vestibular.
I would probably lean to the vestibular, would be my guess. Let's figure it out. If I cut the vestibular, that means her brain's not going to get this information. Well, why would that help her symptoms? Was it?
It's when you remove the vomiting.
That's right. So the brain would no longer get this information that all these hairs are getting bent, therefore I won't feel the balance change. Yes?
What question for you though, is if we were to cut that,
Yeah?
wouldn't she no longer get any sense of time and space where she was, and wouldn't that make you incredibly nauseous? If you don't get any input?
We'll talk about that. But there's other inputs, but yeah, it would make life more difficult. But the other option's worse. What happens if you cut the cochlear? You're deaf, and now you're still dizzy and throw up. Right? So I cut your cochlear, you're deaf and dizzy, versus cutting vestibular, you're hearing, but you're not dizzy. So which one's better? Deaf and sick, or just sick? Right? So let's go through it. So we're going to work on the hierarchy of feeling to answer your question. And this will also explain motion sickness. This will be the last thing we talk about today. So the thing to remember is, your brain is what determines this information. You're just sending messages to your brain. The brain has to interpret it. So we're going to make a little list here of what your brain uses to interpret where you are, your balance. What are some things your brain could use to figure out if I'm falling down?
Visual.
Visual field, so vision. What would the brain look at to tell if I'm falling out of my chair? The horizon, right? So when I'm standing here, my brain subconsciously is looking at the windows and making sure they're not turning. That tells my brain I'm not falling over, at least my head isn't. So your brain would use vision information as part of its, are you balanced? What else could your brain use to tell that you're balanced or not? My ear stuff, right? So I have the semicircular canals. And I have the ear rocks. Got this. You can say ear rocks, that's cool. What's the fluid in my ear doing? What are the rocks doing? Yes?
What about the skeletal muscle?
Yes! Did that in lab last week. Proprioreceptors. Remind me where those were? Where were proprioreceptors?
Joints.
Joints, skin, muscles. Let's do joints. So in English, my brain will, quote, look around. It'll ask the ears what they're feeling, and ask my muscles, what are you doing? All those four things should add up to what I am. So if I'm standing here nice and still, the horizon's fixed, my ears aren't spinning, the rocks aren't moving, my limbs aren't moving, my brain says you must be standing upright. Okay? If I start to fall, one of those begins to change. The horizon changes, the rocks begin to fall, my limbs begin to move, and my brain says you're falling down. Right? So the brain's job is to check all these things, and they should all make sense. So let's make you car sick. So you're going to sit in the back of a van reading a book. And the way that goes, right? Okay. Why does reading in the back of a car make you sick? Or driving if it's not?
Because you aren't looking at the horizon.
Yeah. What's the horizon if you're reading a book in the back of the car?
The
The book, right? So the book is not changing if you're reading the book. What is your ear rocks and fluid doing on the road to the coast? They're all over the map, right? And the brain is figuring out that what it's seeing and what it's feeling are not the same. So what does the brain default to make you do when it can't figure out if you're standing or not?
It tries to
Throw up, right? If you get sick enough, you'll lie on the ground crying. The brain knows that these should all go to zero, right? If you're lying on the ground, you'll close your eyes. These will go away. You won't move. I can figure that out.
But isn't it also like looking at the horizon and then looking at the book too?
Right. That's partly it, is your brain's getting mixed signals.
Yeah.
So tell me why driving a car you don't get sick. Let's see. I see the road. I feel the road. I feel the road. I am the road. Right? Everything made just sense. I'm looking out the front of my car. I see the road. My hand on the steering wheel matches the road. My ear rocks feel the road at the same time. Okay, so everything, the brain can make more sense of that.
Is it better, because I've seen people that get car sick just sitting in the front seat.
Yes, my sister.
Because when the car is moving, when you're driving, your brain's thinking we're going to move.
Yes. So you can get sick in the front seat by looking out the side window, not noticing where you're going. Right? Because then what you're feeling is different than what you see. Right? So one reason you get sick is what they call brain confusion. The brain can't make sense of which of these is true, so it defaults and has you get sick. And that's to make you lie on the ground, cry and whimper, and eventually the brain can sort it back out again.
What about when you're changing elevations?
That's similar, because elevation, what happens a lot of times is you get the pressure buildup in your ear, that changes the frequency of these, and your brain starts to miscalculate.
So why can't people who get car sick just tell themselves that they're in a car and the car's moving? You know, why can't it be that simple that you just tell your brain what's going on?
Mind over matter.
Right.
Why does
Yeah.
that happen when you have help?
Are they just they're just more sensitive, like?
You gotta convince your brain that it's wrong. That's a hard sell to your brain, right? Your brain's never wrong, right? So in the dark ages, when you went on an airplane ride, it would give you a pill, so you wouldn't throw up in the plane. Have you ever what that pill means? Dramamine. Anyone now can figure out what Dramamine, you used to have to tape it somewhere. Am I old enough to know that? You taped it to the back of your ear. Can anyone now guess what Dramamine was doing if it's an anesthetic taped to my ear?
Numbing.
I'm numbing these, right? If I turn these off, why does that help me not get sick?
Because then you're only relying on your vision and your.
That's right. If these are not on, they can't tell my brain something different than my eyes and my joints. So there's less to correlate if there's only 2 versus 4.
Well, now they have it on the wrist.
Right, you can take a pill, you can do the wrist thing. The goal is the more of these I shut off, the less confused the brain gets. But the harder it is for the brain to figure stuff out. Right? It's hard to be balanced with just your eyes. You'll get a headache, you'll get migraines from it. But the trick is, it eliminates the vomiting because my brain's confused. Right?
You mean it's less confused?
Less confused. I'm always confused. That's, again, the brain is using this information that you're sending it to try to figure out where you are. Right? So scuba divers will report that they get under the water, they totally forget where they are. Why is that? Why would scuba diving make you possibly not know where anything is? How much do you weigh underwater?
Less.
So what do rocks do underwater? They're going to float, right? So therefore you don't know where down is. It's dark, it's water, whatever. You have no idea where down is. Everything looks the same, so your brain can't figure out where you are. Right? So divers will go the wrong way. They'll go down because they can't figure out where up is because the brain can't sort out that this is off. What do they tell divers to do?
Blow bubbles and
Follow the bubbles because bubbles go up. But you have to be taught that skill because otherwise your brain can't figure it out. Anything that messes with these systems makes your brain forget where your balance is, or up or down.
Do your proprioceptors not work as well because of the weightlessness?
Yeah, partly you have less on your, everything feels the same. Right? Make sense? So the goal of balance is to get as much information to the brain will sort it out. Right? So next time you're getting sick on an airplane, you can just try to drink yourself into oblivion. That's why alcohol is so good on a plane, right? I turn off my cerebellum, I don't give a rip. Right? Now you know why. I'm turning off the interpretation so my brain doesn't care. Yes, don't have one drink. Keep drinking. I don't drink, though. Make sense? Understand special senses. So on Wednesday's class, you have a god-awful table you have to fill out, and we'll tell you what's on the exam on Monday. Make sense?
Table, that's it.
The endocrine table from hell.
So that's going to be on the exam.
Yes, that'll be on the exam next week. So
Awesome.
we'll start covering that on Wednesday. We may want to start putting it in early.
So are you going to tell us what's on the exam since it's
Wednesday?
next?
Wednesday.
Okay.
Okay.